All right. Okay.
All
Hey
right,
guys, I
Sam.
hope everyone's having an amazing, amazing Tuesday. So, as promised, I am bringing you America's most recognized and notorious in the most amazing way asset protection attorney. And this is Clint Coons from Anderson Advisors. So, guys, I'm so excited to bring Clint to you today. I've known Clint for, gosh, probably I don't know, 4 years now, and like not even close, the most knowledgeable person I know that understands our business as real estate investors, because he's also an investor, understands the tax side of it and understands the action protection side of it. So, Clint, I would love for you just to let's just have a conversation. If you can kind of just we'll start sharing some knowledge and we'll dialogue back and forth and
You just
yeah.
want me to just start talking, right?
I
Just
mean
go
that's
for it,
you're
Clint. See where
so
we gotta
good at it.
go.
You're so good at it. You're so good at teaching. I love it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so a lot of times people want to know, as real estate investors, what's important? What should you be focusing on when it comes to asset protection, tax planning, business planning? And I tell them you got to look at all three. And the reason why you need to look at all three is because if you just focus, just on one aspect of what you're doing in real estate, you're going to find that you're going to miss out on opportunities because I don't know what your goals are. You know, when I started investing in real estate, I set a goal for myself. I wanted to have 100 properties. And of course, you want to get there as fast as you can. But you find along the way, you can make missteps that's going to slow that progress down to get to that final end zone. And I made a number of these missteps. I'm going to say I'm not perfect. I mean, I grew up in real estate. My father was an avid real estate investor, but he didn't grow a huge portfolio, 25, 30 properties. That was a lot for him. And that's what he has today. But I recognize, I wanted to have a larger portfolio and I wanted to do it fast because I saw the benefits that come from real estate. My father retired when he was 50 years old and he lives a comfortable lifestyle right now. The most annoying thing my mom will tell you is that he orders on Amazon far too often and they're always coming to the gate to be buzzed in. So that's not a bad problem, right? But how you get there along the journey, entities is something that can either help you or can hurt you. And many people don't grasp this until they're in the throes of not being able to put a deal together. They can't get financing and they're just so frustrated. They're going, what did I do? Or more importantly, what did that attorney do? Maybe because, sometimes people do actually use attorneys. They don't use legal doom to create their own entities on their own because,
Legal
as
doom.
you, yeah, well, it's a mistake, right? If you're not up on it, you're not going to understand this stuff. Creating entities on your own, as I like to tell people, it's low value work for you. Your high value work is out there investing, and that's what you should be focusing on. Not trying to figure out the tax code, trying to figure out if you set the proper structure up, because if you haven't and you get sued and it doesn't protect you, your defense can't be, well, hell, I didn't know. So therefore, you can't hold me responsible for this because of the fact I wasn't aware of the laws. So you want to turn that over to someone who understands it, especially how it relates to real estate. And so if we're going to bring that back then to what I was referring to with these three legs of a stool for real estate investors, asset protection, tax planning, and business planning, it's really crucial that you apply the right entities, the right tax selection, and the right situation. Because your failure to do so may not be readily apparent today, but it could affect you in the future. For example, I talked to this one individual and he was investing in multifamily properties, and his problem materialized later on. So he bought this property and he put it in what is referred to as a disregarded LLC. So everyone's familiar with limited liability companies because that's the entity du jour. Everyone sets one up, but how you set it up is so important. So he went to his CPA and his CPA set this LLC up for him, and he structured it as a disregarded LLC, which means it doesn't have to file a tax return. And I'm sure you could grasp, here you are, you're setting up an LLC and your CPA is telling you, we can create this entity so you're not going to have to pay me every year $1,200 to file a tax return. And you're like, hey, right on, the guy's looking out for my best interests. When in reality, the CPA doesn't even understand what his interests are because he didn't ask him, what was your intent in buying this multifamily property? Did you want to keep it for 20 years? Is it going to be part of your portfolio, or are you going to stabilize it and sell it? And because he didn't have that conversation, he didn't create the right structure. And that's assuming he even would know the questions to ask and know what to do if he got the answers. So he set up this LLC, disregarded, and the investor stabilized their property. It took him about 2.5 years. Then he tried to sell it. And I got involved in it because he called me up. He saw me on YouTube and he said, "Hey, I'm having this problem. I can't sell this property, and I've been trying to sell it, and these buyers keep falling out of financing." And I asked him, I said, "Well, how's it structured?" He said, "It's an LLC." And I said, "Interesting. I bet that LLC is a disregarded entity." And he wasn't sure, didn't understand what that term meant. And so, I just said, "Hey, you don't have to file a tax return for it." He goes, yeah, I don't have to file a tax return. I said, "Exactly." And all the underwriters keep asking your buyers where the tax returns are for the entity because they need to verify the income and expenses. And your 1040 isn't going to cut it. Your balance sheet, your profit and loss that you're handing over, they don't know if that's rigged or not. So here you are in this situation. Your entity is actually preventing you from going through with a deal that you would like to take care of right now. Get your money, get out, get in, get paid, whatever you refer to it, but you can't. So what's going to happen is you're going to have to probably most likely carry that contract for 2 years to allow them to develop the income and expenses and then refi you out. And if anybody's ever invested in multifamily before, there are people that want to get into the space that don't know anything about it. And so they could buy your property and next thing you know, you get it back in 2 years because they ran it in the ground because they don't understand how to maintain that stuff. And so this is a classic example of someone who they think they're setting up the right structure. They want the asset protection. Granted, the LLC is going to offer you the asset protection, but at the end of the day, they didn't understand what the larger picture was, is that they wanted to sell the property and they should have set it up with that in mind. And so you see that a lot with real estate investors when it comes to creating their planning. Now, on the tax side, so if I were to ask everyone who's watching right now, hey, how many of you want to reduce your taxes down to zero? It's always a show of hands. Some people will put up both hands. It's like, I want to eliminate all taxes for the rest of my life. That sounds cool. And I agree with you. Reducing taxes is something you should look at when it comes to investing. But there's scales here that you have to also pay attention to. That you can go too far with your tax planning. I mean, you can get very creative and you can eliminate taxes altogether and you can sit back and pat yourself on the back and say, wow, look what I was able to accomplish. But at the end of the day, is it helping you or hurting you? It may be putting more money in your pocket today, but is it affecting your long-term wealth? And that's what I find with a lot of people who focus solely on taxes. They miss the point that if you're investing in real estate, for many of us, it's about building wealth, perpetual streams of income. And that wealth creation, unless you have just gobs of cash that you can go out and pay for everything, is going to be dependent on your ability to have access to capital. And when you are applying for a loan, what is one thing that the underwriter's typically going to ask for? Copies of your tax returns. Exactly. So here I am. I'm 2 years into my practice. So we started our practice in '99. When I say we, my partner Toby and I, we started in Washington State, and there was about 14 people working for us at that time. Now we have over 180 people, and we have offices in 4 different states.
I didn't realize you were that big. You guys were that big.
Yeah, I know. It goes fast. It's surprising. Yeah, bigger office, bigger payroll. So, and more headaches. So anyways, we get this business going. And we get our CPA, because at that time we didn't do taxes. We were just strictly the asset protection side before we actually brought the taxes in-house. And that's why our firm's so big. So we have a tax component side to it, 50, 60 people on that side, then the legal business planning side. And our CPA at that time gives me the return. And I'd already paid in, I don't know, 100 grand that year because it was a really good year. He said, you owe another $80,000 in taxes. I was like, the hell? Where's that money coming from? And I'm a 50% owner. Toby's a 50% owner. So I went down to Toby and I said, Toby, we got a problem. I don't got the 80,000. I said, do you have the 80,000? I said, if you do have the 80,000, then you're probably stealing from me. So we got other questions we got to talk about, right? And he didn't have it. And so we decided we better get a little creative with how we account for our income. And sometimes when people you hear that word, they think that we're going to engage in something that is, definitely far, far into the gray area or in the black. No, we're not. That's not exactly what we were doing. We were just looking at the way our business generated its income and finding ways to defer that income. And we came across a provision on the code that allowed us to defer our income or a good portion of it. So we actually reversed that. We went from owing the IRS 80 grand to getting 100 grand back that we paid in. We're high-fiving one another. I know, right? And the CPA signed off on it. He looked at it and he goes, wow, I wish I would have thought of that. And that was kind of the clue I needed to start my own tax department right then and there, when your own CPA doesn't know this stuff. And we're so ecstatic about what we're able to do. And we did this actually for 4 years. We would teach people, hey, this is what we're doing. We're not paying any taxes. And everybody's like, wow, that's really cool. Can you help me reduce my taxes? And so that's kind of where the focus went between 2000 and I don't know, 1 to 2005, really focused heavy on that and tax reduction. But you see, I was not seeing the forest of the trees. I didn't understand that by taking that step, I was really putting or affecting my ability to engage in real estate investing. I would go out there and I try to put deals together, larger deals together. I couldn't do it. They would look at they say, hey, I want to copy your 2 years of tax returns. I'm like, no, you don't. No, we really need to see them. I said, you don't need, let's just talk about stated income. And they would say, no, we still need to see it. And then they would get them and then they say, well, you make no money. It's like, oh, you just can't believe tax returns. I really do make money. It just doesn't show up there. And so the implication in that statement is that you're drug dealer, maybe, or you're engaged in some nefarious activity. So I actually took myself out of the ability to grow my portfolio. And when I talk about having over 100 properties, that came at the tail. I actually really began in 2010, where I got really active in investing. And maybe there was a little blessing there because I missed out where a lot of people lost money in real estate because they got caught up. And then about this.
Yeah, 2008, 2009.
Yeah, it was just
I will never forget it.
No one will forget that.
Will.
Yeah, because once you've been through it, you don't want to go through it again. Now, I was pretty fortunate because when I came out on the tail end of that, since I hadn't been investing in real estate, I was sitting on some cash. I was able to start my investing at a really great time because everything was depressed. But it did teach me something valuable. I actually made a change. Toby and I decided we needed to change how we account for our income. And we went back and we gave up those strategies and we started to actively showing income on our return and paying more in taxes that some people say you probably should have. But the reason we were doing it is that I wanted to look really good to lenders. And so it was with that in mind that I made that conscious decision. And so this is another area where I see individual real estate investors making mistakes, is that they focus on the taxes to their detriment down the road. Now, you may have some experienced investors on here, and I understand that as you start doing larger deals, they become asset-based loans. They're going to become experience-based loans. And so your taxes and your income that you generate become less and less important. But if you're a single family investor, you're just getting started, that's going to be important for you. So you have to always balance that in your planning. And so what this really leads to is that when you have tax and you have asset protection, what so many investors fail to realize is that real estate needs to be treated as a business. All right. It's not a hobby. It's not just a buy a property here and there type, I'm just a little investor. No, you need to be in the business. That's where you're going to find success. And it's through that mindset that your portfolio is going to grow so much quicker. And so what we do at Anderson is we walk people through a process where we look at it from the tax planning side, from the asset protection planning side. And then we also focus on the business planning side of what they're doing and explain to them that how they set up their structures can, as I stated earlier, either help or hurt. I mean, you take people that flip real estate, for instance. I mean, it's so many times I see flippers struggling to get out of working with hard money lenders, private money lenders, and not be able to tap into traditional financing. In fact, I did a podcast today with an individual that's found tremendous success. He's been flipping for 8 years in the Portland area, and he's got a whole crew working for him and all this stuff. And we started talking about the financing side of it. And he uses traditional money. And he said the way he he gained access to traditional lenders. Because I mean, you can't walk into a bank and say, I want to flip a property, and they're going to give you all the money for the purchase and the rehab, right? I mean, you've been doing this, you know that. And so you'd have to deal with these hard money lenders. And what you would like to do, of course, is if you have a house that has equity in it, get a home equity loan. There's where you can start your seed capital, so you can start funding your own deals or reduce the amount of money you need to rely on through private money or other investors that you need to bring in to joint venture on these deals. So he said that's what he did. And I said, well, that's because you had decent tax returns, because you were showing income. That's how you're able to do it. And more importantly, you didn't go into the bank with a tax return that shows your flipper. He goes, yeah, nothing shows up on my 1040. And so this is another problem investors have, is that the activity that they're engaging in, I mean, if you flip real estate, you're toxic to lenders. And it's not that they're not even going to loan on your property. They won't give you loans on other assets because they're so worried about the risk exposure they face in dealing with you, because you may lose your capital, because they've been burned, as we were talking about.
Right.
So what do you do then? Well, this individual I was working, I started talking to, he's from Bellevue, and he said that he had talked to an attorney, and the attorney said, oh, set up the LLC. Of course, like that's what they all say, because you're a real estate investor. And then he went to a CPA, and CPA said, oh, set it up as an S Corp, which is another mistake that I see a lot of people always assume, that the S Corp is the way to go from a tax standpoint, because they hear this double taxation, such a dreaded word. It's not. I mean, it's actually, depending on where you live, you should be looking for double taxation, because between state and federal, they're taking more out of you than it would be if you did have double taxation with a C Corp. But that's a different story. So he ended up getting this information, and he asked me, he goes, well, what do you think about this? I said, well, your CPA looked at it from an your attorney looked at it from an asset protection side, told you to do an LLC. Makes sense. He's an attorney. CPA looks at it from a CPA's point of view, how to reduce your active income, because flipping property is all active income. So you have to pay employment taxes on everything. And it's like, you could save $6,000 a year. I get it. That's what CPAs look at. They want to show that they can do something for you. You know, I'm a hybrid. I look at it as how I'm going to make your business a success. Where your problems lie and how we can find solutions. That's what we're focused on at Anderson. I said, you know, your problem, yes, it's asset protection because you've been flipping in your own name. We need to take care of that. Yeah, it's, you know, you do pay a little bit in taxes, and it'd be nice to take care of that as well, but now's not the time. And he's like, well, what do you mean it's not the time? I said, listen, you're spending $24,000 a year in interest. That tells me you're dealing with hard money lenders. And I knew this because I looked at his tax return. And I said, if I was in your position, I would try to get away from those HMLs. And I assume you've already tried it, because on the asset questionnaire, strategy session query I had you fill out prior to this conference, you indicated you have a house with over $1 million in equity. I mean, to me, that's your seed capital. But the problem is you can't access that because you've tried. And as soon as the lender saw your tax returns, asked what you do, they found out you flip real estate, you became persona non grata to them. So my advice to you is to change how you conduct your business so that lenders don't know what you're doing. So you have a cleaner 1040 when you apply for a loan, because the S corporation is going to throw all that activity down onto your 1040. The CPA doesn't understand what your real challenges are. If you run it through a C Corp, nothing shows up on your 1040. They don't know that you flip property. Heck, you're now an executive of, you know, Fair Star Home Solutions, okay, the premier housing provider of the Pacific Northwest, whatever it wants to be. You're an executive of that company. You take a W-2. All your income is going to come out as W-2. You're going to check a box for them. So now you go from someone that they don't want to work with to someone that is very attractive to them because you're a W-2 wage earner. And they're not going to be crawling up into your business, knowing all about your business, because they see that you're in business for yourself. Because this is a problem you have with active business owners. When you run it through an S Corp, you get a K1, and that shows up on your 1040. Before you get a lender or an underwriter is going to give you a loan, they're going to want to see your balance sheet, your profit and loss, your tax returns for that business entity. And you can get creative in that entity. Let's say you start doing some creative tax planning, and you have your balance sheet shows greater liabilities on it than you do assets, then you run into liquidity problems under the liquidity test, which then fails you for the loan. I mean, there's so many little traps built into the underwriting process right now that if you don't understand them, it is a minefield you're walking through with a blindfold on. So my advice to people when they're engaging in an active business is to actually set up a C Corp so no one knows you're in business for yourself. You're just some executive, you get this nice big fat paycheck. I said, then go get you a home equity loan against your property with that W-2 income. I said, there's going to solve your problem. Yeah, you're not going to save the $6,000 that the CPA promised you. I understand that. You need to appreciate that. But who likes working with a hard money lender and paying out $24,000 a year? That's what we're going to chip against. So this is what, we look at Anderson, and as a real estate investor look at, I mean, just the simple thing. So another mistake that I see people make when it comes to investing is they'll create all these LLCs and they'll be set up disregarded and they'll show up on their 1040. Again, they don't want to file tax returns. It's amazing how many people are so adverse to paying a professional to do something because they don't understand the long-term implications benefit to them of doing it the right way. Oh, I don't have to file tax returns. All right, fine. You're going to save yourself $1,000 a year, but you're going to have, let's say you had a portfolio of 12 properties. All 12 properties now are going to show up on your 1040 Schedule E page 1, which means that it appears, even if they're in LLCs, if they're disregarded LLCs like we talked about earlier, it appears that you own them in your own name from the eyes of the IRS. So they're all get listed there because that's how you have to list them on your 1040. Now, you want to buy property number 13. When you go to apply for a loan on property number 13, the underwriter again asks for copies of your tax returns. And let's say all 12 of those properties produce for you, I don't know, $90,000 a year in income. So when they're looking at your debt to income ratio, determine your ability to repay the loan on property number 13, how much of that $90,000 do you think they actually count into their calculations in that ratio? It's not 100%. Under Freddie Fannie guidelines, because this is typically what you're going to be qualifying for unless it's a portfolio lender you're working with, it's going to be about 70 to 75%. They just cut 25% right off the top for vacancies, and they're not going to give it to you. And so all of a sudden your ratios go down, even though you can show a performance that, for the last 2 years, 3 years, your vacancy rates maybe only been 5%, but it doesn't matter. They have to go by these guidelines. So if you know what they have to go by, change the way your tax returns appear to them. So one of the things that I like to do with the real estate investors is we take a real estate investor in that category and say, all right, you can still have all these properties held in separate LLCs, because I'm a proponent of that, one LLC per property. And I know some people say, well, that's just a waste of money. I'll tell you what, you'll not be saying it's a waste of money the first time you're involved in a lawsuit and somebody's trying to take all your properties from you. I'm going to be the one you're going to call and go, what can I do now? And I'm going to say, you should have talked to me 7 months ago and we would have separated them all out, because at this point in time, there's nothing we can do for you. So you can create separate entities for each of your properties, but at the end of the day, have them all flow down into one entity that provides what I call a holding entity. We set up these anonymity compliant LLCs that also have charging order protections that give you great benefits when it comes to asset protection. And you can essentially hold a portfolio so that no one even knows you're associated back to it unless you see a copy of your tax return. But what happens though on your tax returns is that the income from your rental real estate no longer appears on Schedule E page 1, because we don't have to list all those properties out any longer, because you don't own them directly or indirectly through an LLC that's disregarded. You own them through a partnership, and a partnership gives you a K1, and that K1 is a line item that shows up on page 2 of your Schedule E. And so what's interesting about that is that when you have a K1 that gives you a line item number like that on page 2, income from your rental real estate, you get to use 100% of that for your loan.
Interesting.
Yep, same properties, but just we change how they appear on your return. And so this is what we focus on when we're looking at working with real estate investors to help them grow their business, putting them in a position where what they're doing with their investing isn't actually preventing that growth from going forwards. So
I
did a
know
lot of
that
talking there.
Yeah, well, your wealth of information. I know that especially when people are new to just looking into asset protection, because sometimes people will get pretty far into their career and not even realize that this is a thing. So it's always good when you do. But I know that there tends to be a tendency for some people to go towards the low cost provider. Well, let me find the cheapest CPA, when the reality is you need somebody who understands what the business is and your goals and is aggressive and can help you, balance everything. And then same with the attorney. And there's any regular people can offer the service of setting up an LLC. But I think one of the greatest things that just in talking to you over the years that you've really shown me is just that there really is strategy that goes so far beyond the surface. And sometimes, even as real estate investors, unless you've been doing it a really long time and know asset protection and have counseled with you, it's like we don't even necessarily know what questions to ask, or we don't know what we don't know. And I'm sure because you see all the crap that happens, you
Yeah.
ask good questions to really vet out where the risks are and what are the goals.
Yeah. I mean, most people, if they have residential any real estate for that matter, they went into an attorney, they call someone up on these low cost solution providers. They're going to say, hey, I own real estate. I want to protect it. They're going to tell you, oh, you need to set up an LLC, and then they'll take care of it. You won't be part of the process. You won't understand what they're doing, why they're doing, how they're doing it. And I know this because at our workshops, out of the 100 people that are there, I'll ask this question: how many of you created an LLC? And probably 25% of them will raise their hand. And then I'll begin to ask them individually, what type of LLC did you create? And they'll stare at me and they'll say, well, an LLC. I said, no, we already addressed that you set up an LLC. I want to know what type. And they can't answer the question because they don't even know that there's a difference in LLCs, that there's different types of LLCs you can create, because the professional that they worked with, or maybe they didn't, no one explained it to them and why they're setting it up the right way. So then, if you're involved in a situation and you're having to sign documents or you're being sued, you need to be able to explain it and know what you're doing. And so that's what really sets us apart. Where one of the things that Toby and I agreed upon, and which I think has made our partnership so phenomenal over the years, is that we felt that education was paramount before we work with clients, is that they need to understand what it is we can do for them, what are the right questions to ask before we engage with them. And my grandfather, he was an attorney for 50 years, and he saw the way I started practicing, where I would teach these workshops, and they're just tons of information. All right. It's just pound in the information so that people walk out of there just, oh my gosh, I can't absorb anymore. Why did you tell me so much? Because you need to know it. You don't have to understand it all that you can go out and execute on this. You just need to know the right questions to ask. That if an issue presents itself, you know how to spot the issue and then take action or get help, rather than just going down that road. And then after the horse has left the barn, you're trying to get it to corral and bring it back in. And many times we can't. My grandfather saw that business model, and he's a traditional attorney. He said, you know what, Clint? He goes, you're never going to find success as an attorney. And, it was after a few glasses of wine. So he was kind of just joking with me, but he was half serious, because he said, what you're doing is you're teaching your clients how to play the game. You're giving them the ball, and they're not going to need you. They're going to walk out of your office, and why would they hire you to do the work when you've just taught them everything they need to know to do it on their own? And so he had a different philosophy on the practice of law. Our philosophy has always been, educate the clients. They're going to use us because they're going to see the value in what we provide. More importantly, then we can have a more intelligent conversation when we talk about the structuring that we're doing, because they already have a base foundation. And so that going forwards, as their business grows, we can strategize together. It becomes more collaborative than just one-sided. So I think that's really helped, Anderson.
I didn't realize you guys had been around for over 20 years.
Yeah, a long time. I mean, don't I look it?
Well, I mean, I didn't know you started it when you were 4. That's adorable.
Okay, I was going to say, you're supposed to say no, right?
Like one of the reasons, Clint, that I had asked you specifically, because there's a lot of people in this space, there's a lot of asset protection attorneys. Mm-hmm. And there's maybe one other in the whole US that I even know does like these multiple services like you do. And the reason I asked you specifically to come on, one, just because, I mean, I remember being at a conference with 1,000 multifamily investors, and I already knew you, but I was like, holy crap, That's Clint on stage. Like, he was the one that was selected by this very high end group to present to everyone, because you are the best of the best. And part of why I wanted you to come here and talk to us is a lot of the people that are in this group are, so there's a lot of people who are brand new and they're getting knowledge, and that's cool. So this is super great for them to hear it. But there's a lot of people in the group who are doing move up investing. So they've been investing in 2 to 4 families or maybe even small apartments. And they're positioning to take the next step. And I want to present all the information so that they do it carefully and safely, and just to make sure that they know that this is a thing, and why go through all of this to build it just to lose it.
Yeah,
I mean,
you're right.
I remember this story that you told. I can't remember when it was, but I think I've heard you tell it a couple times over the years. And there was somebody, like a property manager, and there was a gun, and I can't remember what it was. It was a very dramatic story, but it just drove home, like, you could lose it all. Like, you can legitimately lose everything if you don't set it up right. And it's a game, but it's a game with real dollars that our whole lives are based on. So it's just so important to work with someone
Yeah.
that, can really understand all the pieces and the risks.
Some of the hardest conversations that I've had with people has been where you sit down with them and they'll tell you right away, they said, listen, I can't afford your services. I'm not ready to use you yet, but I want to introduce myself. And then they'll start telling me a backstory of how they built up these large portfolios, and one tragic accident occurs and they lose everything. I mean, I could teach an event all day long just on the horror stories. You want to scare someone into setting up an LLC? I could definitely do it. In about 8 hours, you wouldn't be able to sleep straight for a week until you got yourself protected, because things happen in life. And if you're not prepared for it, I mean, some people say, well, I'll just buy extra insurance. Yeah, you can keep telling yourself that, and then wait until the accident actually occurs, and then see whether or not that insurance is going to be there to protect you, or if it wasn't excluded under the policy because you didn't read page 18, fine print, 10-point font that says, because you didn't notify the insurance company that you had this particular issue with the property, they have a reason to exclude or deny coverage. So wow. It just happens, and you don't find yourself in that situation. Think of structuring as an inexpensive form of insurance that once you've set it up, you're going to forget about it. It's going to pay you back dividends should anything ever happen.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. So Clint, I know that you had said just before we got on the call that if people wanted to just talk to someone, for a few minutes, or I don't know how long you do little sessions for, but that you would make that available to the people in this group. Can you just tell us a little bit about it? You and I didn't really talk that much about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the individual, like for example, the guy that came down from Bellevue, I would charge $750 for a 1-hour strategy session to look over their structures and make a determination as to what they should set up and tell them the entities they need. What we're doing for your people that are on this, seeing this live on Facebook or watch a recording, we're going to provide that to you for no charge. That if you want to set up it could go from 30 minutes to an hour strategy session. We're going to provide it to you. Of course, we're going to ask you to fill out some information ahead of time, because we need information so that we can dig into your structure to see what it is you're doing. Or maybe you're not doing anything yet, but you're just getting started. You want to know, for example, you're wholesaling. What is the best way to structure it? Hey, this is beneficial. It's no cost. You're going to work with one of the preeminent firms in the country that works specifically with real estate investors. And we're going to take that 3-legged approach to it. And if you want to take advantage of that, we've set up a special website where anybody they're seeing this live right now or watch the replay, they want to go to, if they go to that link, just fill in the information. We'll contact you then from giving us your information, and we'll get that strategy session set up for you.
And that's that link that you gave me before we get started? Okay.
Yes, it is. You're going to put that in the down below.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So guys, I'll put that. I'll edit the verbiage in this, and I'll include it in the link, and then I'll put this in the units tab, and I'll put it in the notes there too. So you guys, if you want to sit down and talk to someone for free about asset protection, what all are all the things that people should think of you from? Because maybe it's someone that's on this call and they're like, oh yeah, I do want to talk to you about asset protection, but let's say they're like, oh, but do you do this? Maybe there's someone else that could benefit. Yeah. Can you just talk about a little bit like what different kinds of things that you guys do? That would be a benefit.
So we offer Basically business setup services. So we set up corporations, LLCs, limited partnerships, living trust, land trust, wholesale trust. We also provide tax planning services, bookkeeping services. We set up nonprofits. There's a lot in the nonprofit realm where real estate investors sometimes move into because there's special deals out there, especially with HUD, where you can gain access to properties before they hit the public records and at discounts. We also provide planning on the retirement side. So people have money tied up in IRAs or 401ks, and they would like to put it to use in real estate because they see it's a more stable investment, but they don't know how to make that link. How do I take it from my IRA or my 401k with my prior employer and move that forwards? Well, we help them do that through the setup of what I refer to as qualified retirement plans, where you can roll that money in, you're in control of it, it's your plan, but then you can invest in real estate, you can be a private money lender, you name it. So our services are predominantly related to those three legs of the stool: asset protection planning, business planning, tax planning. We don't do contract drafting. So if you called me up and said, hey, Clint, I need a contract with my tenant, that's not us. We stick to what we know, stay in our space.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, Clint, thank you so much. You are a wealth of information. Guys, I will put that link up for you, and you're awesome. And thank you for being here today.
Thanks very much, Stace.
All right, Clint.
Bye-bye.
Bye.